Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about all things vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that this show is something that you will look forward to checking in with every single week. Okay, so it's been a hot one this week, hasn't it, Utah? I know for me, I've been finishing up a huge harvest of peas. I've had the best crop of peas this year than I ever have, to the point that I usually they never really make it into the house. But this year, I have so many that I'm actually like planning dinners around adding peas, and I'm like pasta recipes with peas in them and everything. But it's been really exciting. But I know for me, the harvest of peas is pretty much done. They're not flowering anymore. It's really time to let the spring crops go. So one of my Saturday projects will be to pull out the pea plants, and for that matter, say goodbye to all the other spring crops like the spinach. The spinach has been great this year as well, but it's starting to bolt. I tend to leave that in the ground a little longer than normal because I love to take the whole plant out and just go give it to the chickens. The chickens really love a little chicken salad is what I call it, but it's just spinach basically straight up from the ground. So I tend to just give them one spinach plant a day, and they just pick away at it and they really love it. Anyway, so today is a super special episode. Today we have LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens. Millcreek Gardens is up on 35th South and 9th East in Salt Lake, Millcreek area. And they've been there since 1955. And LaRene was on episode 1. She was the very first guest that I had on the podcast. And if you haven't heard that and you're just now sort of getting into Gardening Utah, and if you are, welcome. My name is Jana. So in episode 1, we just have kind of this magical conversation about our love for gardening. We talk a lot about our grandma's gardens and the history of, the pioneers and the plants that they brought back when they came across and everything. It was just a really, really interesting episode. So if you haven't listened to LaRene in episode 1, it's great. But now we're way past that, and today we're going to talk with LaRene. She's going to be telling us all about what we can still plant, because it is starting to get hot. It is creeping up here on July, if you can even believe that. And a lot of people assume, oh, it's too late for this, it's too late for that, it's too late. But it's not. There's so many things you can still get in the ground, especially if you find a great garden center around Utah that has some of the things more established. So we're going to get into all of that as far as what you can still plant, even on the ornamental side. And speaking of the ornamental side, LaRene's really going to talk a lot about plant combinations with perennials and some shrubs and some really interesting pairings that you can do with some kind of lower level trees that don't get too high. And anyway, we just have a really lovely conversation about some of her favorite plants. So we're going to get into that in a minute. But first, the tip of the week.
860 KKAT with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is how to prevent blossom end rot. Now, what is blossom end rot? Well, it is a darkening and rotting of the bottom end of a tomato, or maybe a pepper, or even sometimes a zucchini. Now, contrary to a very popular garden myth, this is not a lack of calcium in your soil. Blossom end rot is caused by stressors in your plant, which hinder the movement of calcium through the plant to the fruit. Now, what creates this movement? It's most often water or lack thereof. But it also can be caused by cold temperatures early in the season as well. So if you see blossom end rot coming on to some of your first blooms and your plants were impacted in that big cold snap we got last month, that issue could be because of the cold, and the blossom end rot will typically self-correct itself in the middle of the season. But most often, and if you don't suspect that, then it's likely the need for consistency in moisture. Now, if you use a soaker hose or drip irrigation, you probably won't experience too much blossom end rot because you are providing consistent moisture, which allows the plant to efficiently process calcium and other nutrients, thus not stressing out the plant. Now, as with anything, some cultivars are more susceptible to injury than others. Roma type tomatoes tend to get them, and the larger bell peppers, I've even had some on mine as well, and they can easily see damage from stress in the Utah climate. But when this comes on, often maybe a neighbor or, a well-intended friend will suggest, hey, just put down some eggshells or Epsom salts right away as soon as you see blossom end rot, or maybe other items that are anecdotally believed to provide calcium that tomatoes need as soon as you see blossom end rot coming on. But it just doesn't, first of all, it doesn't break down quickly enough to be even available to your plants. Although these methods are commonly shared by gardeners as a means to prevent blossom end rot, the truth is, it's just not true. It's just a popular garden myth. So, now, your tomatoes do need calcium, but that calcium is nearly always present in your soil naturally. So remember, blossom end rot is a sign of stress most often caused by inconsistent watering, which then creates stress to the plant. So if you do experience blossom end rot, simply adjust your watering. And when you take steps to deliver the right amount of water at a consistent rate, your tomato plant and other vegetables will adjust, and in a few weeks, your blossom end rot should just disappear. And for me, I like to go take a little walk around the garden and check out all the upcoming fruit. And if I can tell that there's blossom end rot coming on a particular bud, I will just pull it off, because it doesn't make sense for the plant to put effort into growing that tomato when I know that it's only going to be half there in the first place. So, watering your tomatoes on a consistent basis to prevent blossom end rot, that's my tip of the week. And that was the tip of the week.
Never miss a tip for your garden, and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
All right, Utah. Do you want to know what the second most popular pandemic project for landscapes in Utah is right now? Behind vegetable gardening's resurgence, of course. That is flipping the park strip. You know what I'm talking about. We're talking about when you're walking up your sidewalk and you're noticing that this long strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street is probably also being watered, maybe even at the wrong time of day, and a lot of the water is just draining into the gutter. Culinary water, of course. Well, flipping your park strip has now become a very trendy and a lot more water-wise thing to do, and it also enhances the look of your yard and garden. It really is a lot prettier. I mean, we've all tried to go out and mow a park strip, right? What a pain. So let's all flip our park strips, okay? Now, I admit I have one too. So I'm going to be doing this. And why I'm telling you this is there is a popular Creating Waterwise Park Strip webinar coming up. It's on July 9th at 6:30 p.m. You can pre-register for this because there's a limited amount of people that can join. It's at conservationgardenpark.org/events. I'm going to repeat that. conservationgardenpark.org/events. Go there for information on how to join the Creating Waterways Park Strip webinar, July 9th, 6:30 p.m. I'm going to be there, so I hope you are too. We'll be right back after the break right here on Gardening Utah. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me in our virtual studios today is none other than LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens, where it's always a great day. LaRene, thank you so much for joining me.
It is always a great day. Yeah, you've got the caption down there absolutely right. And gardening is so fun. And we make it a great day every day at Millcreek Gardens. We've been there a long time, and we go to great lengths to find awesome plants and combinations for all of you to go enjoy your outdoor living space, whether it be edible gardening or visual or fragrance, or you're screening something, or you just want to get your fingers dirty and get more healthy in the garden.
Absolutely. And so you were my very first guest on this show. So it's so fun to have you back here for episode 14.
Thank you.
I've gotten so many people that have just said, wow, Jana, I listened to your first episode, made me cry because we just had such a lovely time talking about our passion for gardening and how,
Yes.
we were talking about our grandmother's iris. So if you haven't listened to episode 1, go back on Apple Podcasts and you can hear this episode. It was really inspiring and motivating. So, but LaRene, when we recorded that in studio at KKAT when before COVID-19 turned the world upside down.
Yeah.
And so now obviously we're recording on our phones and, through Zoom and all those things. But tell me, how has the change in the world the last few months impacted Millcreek Gardens for your business as well as for the type of customers that are coming in?
Well, that's a really good question, and it has impacted a lot. And there are so many people very interested in gardening and getting green again, getting their hands in the soil for the mental health of it, for the emotional well-being, as well as for maybe I better grow some food, or hey, I have time. I need to be doing something. I think I'm going to fix up my yard. And through all that, there's many people coming in. There's a surge of customer count, but also there is a surge of new people coming in asking lots of questions, which is remarkable. It is so fun to help them.
Oh, wow. I've noticed that too with Gardening Utah, that so many people are asking me questions about, how do I get started? And here I think for a minute that, all of our listeners are expert gardeners and they're just staying in the know. But no, that's not the case at all. I mean, I'm getting questions of simply like, hey, what's the best way to put my vegetable in the ground? Like, what do I need to think about when I plant this plant? And I'm going, oh, wow, okay, maybe we do need to get back to some of the basics.
Yeah, well, you know what? I like to consider the basics. It's kind of like raising children or thinking of what we need as people, humans. And we need a good foundation. We need some good soil. And adding organic matter to the soil is always helpful. And then we need water and particular amounts of light, like shade plants like hostas and ferns. They're going to need a lot of shade with the impatiens and begonias. But then there's like the sunny things with some with a lot of water, some with less water. We have the drought tolerant and dry living plants and agaves and the different yuccas and agastaches and those kinds of things. And then we just have the beautiful other bedding plants and flowers and trees and shrubs that are normal, like the zinnias and snapdragons and dahlias and spirea shrubs and lilacs, forsythias, all that kind of stuff. And, people really don't know. I was asking a couple of people, hey, do you know what a watermelon plant looks like? Because I had a watermelon plant right next to a watermelon. And I said, you can have a watermelon from this plant, just like this watermelon here, in about 60 days. And they're like, I go, do you even know what a watermelon plant looks like? And they go, no. And I'm like,
what?
Okay, here's a watermelon plant. It has really cut leaves and it's kind of an olive green color. And it's viney and it grows fast. And it was really interesting to me to hear the perspective of that, you think, everybody knows what a watermelon is. Everybody would know, but they don't. And it's not like there's anything wrong with them. It's that they haven't been exposed to that. And so we had really a delightful chat about watermelons and how they can grow their own.
Oh, that's so interesting, and it can be so intimidating for some, like, well, don't watermelons take so long? And I don't even know when to pick them. But really all you need to look out for is once you water them and get them in the ground, that you look for that tendril, right? Which is the little squirrely sort of stem that comes out next to the stem. And once that starts to dry up, that's when it's ready to pick, right? Am I right on that?
Yeah. That's one of the old wives' tales. Another one is to thump them. You thump them, and when they really vibrate the most and have a nice thumpy sound, then that's when you pick them. And it really is remarkable. And it's also a great sense of satisfaction. And it's a great family activity. I also want to talk about how providing your own food, growing your own food, you know where it comes from. And it's very, very healthy for you.
Absolutely. And, I was talking with my guest a couple weeks ago, Cynthia Stringham from, she's got the Melon Monologues on Instagram. And I think she lives kind of up by you, but she was mentioning that, we were just going back and forth on what vegetables taste the best when you grow them yourself versus from when you get them from the store. What's your opinion? Like if you have to pick one.
I always tell people, you know what, grow what you like. Grow what is fun for you. Like they'll say, I want some fruit trees. What fruit trees should I grow? And I'm like, I don't know. What do you like? So peaches are easy. So that's a great one.
True.
Plums are pretty easy. And, you're a couple of years away from harvest, but some of our fruit trees came in pretty sizable this year with fruit on them. So if you want a peach tree, come get a contender peach. They're great. And there's even some out there with fruit on them. But I think it tastes better when you grow it yourself, but grow things that you like and want to eat versus not, because don't waste your time. Don't waste your soil. Don't waste your resources. I will tell you, fresh peas are pretty awesome. I love fresh peas.
It's so interesting that you said that, because I actually today picked my very first pea from the garden, and it was so delicious. It seems so strange that I would stop what I'm doing and text my husband while he's at work, but I was like, I just picked the first pea and I ate it right there, and it was amazing. And it's so silly, but yeah. Anyway.
That is silly. Well, my peas are about 5 inches tall for one group and about 12 inches tall for the other. So I'm right behind you. And they're growing up. They're out there in probably 3/4 sun. Not everything needs full sun. In Utah, if you give your garden a good half a day, 3/4 a day of sun, it'll appreciate some of that shade and it probably even do better. I grew a pumpkin a couple of years ago, and it was a sizable pumpkin, and it was in mostly shade because it was actually a volunteer underneath my a tree where I keep my compost pile going, and I just let it grow.
Oh, wow.
So it was really cool, but it was a lot of shade. And people say, what can I grow in the shade? What kind of plants? Peppers are pretty good in the shade. They're easy to grow. If you want a no-fail garden, do peppers. You can do beans. You can do beans and corn still. You can still plant many, many items in the garden. Maybe you want to buy some larger starts of some of the things. We have tomatoes in anywhere from a 6-pack still up to a 12-inch container. I think there's even a few 14-inch containers out there that you can actually take that home and leave it in that container if you don't have another place to put it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. Put it on the patio and off you go.
Yeah.
In the shade, I mean, you could add mints and herbs like cilantro, maybe some beets, some, some lettuces. I mean, of course it needs some sun, but yeah, you don't need it all in the full sun.
Yeah, the root crops are pretty good to do in the shade too, like potatoes. And the potatoes you can plant deep. You can dig a trench 9 or 10 inches deep and then put the potatoes in there and cover them with a few inches of soil, let them grow up, cover it more as they grow on up. And once they reach the top of the soil, you can even put, have you heard how they put them in tires? Then they put compost in it and they ring the tires up a few layers, or you can just put a box around it and fill it with leaves and grass clippings and soil. And then when it's ready to harvest, you just pull it away and there's a bunch of potatoes sitting there. And there's nothing like fresh potatoes.
Oh boy, isn't that the truth? They're so buttery.
Yes, especially Yukon Golds.
Yes, I'm actually growing some, and then I have some of the purples. And we did ours in pallets. So just to raise it up, like you mentioned, and then we keep adding the dirt.
Yeah, I've done pallet gardening. Have you ever done straw bale gardening?
I have not.
It's where you take the straw bale, and what you do to begin with is you take that and soak it for a couple of days, and you get, they're hollow. The straw parts are hollow, and you just really soak it, and then you go ahead and put your plants in there, and then they start growing. And they grow like amazing, especially things like the vine crops. I've seen them be very, very successful in straw bale gardening.
Straw bale gardening. Oh, I love that. I'm going to look into that more. I actually think I saw a post today about that somewhere on Facebook. So how cool.
Yeah, there's a whole book about it. We have the book and read about it, and I've helped several clients, wanting to do gardening. They've done some straw bale gardening and been very successful and had a heavy crop.
Oh, interesting. I love it. See, it's just creativity, there's so many places that you can put plants.
Well, the pallets are amazing because you have the little cubes, the little groupings of plants you can put in them, and you can row them up, and it can be really organized, and it doesn't take a lot of soil to fill it. And vegetable garden doesn't take a lot of soil. If you want good tomatoes, you got to give them a big pot. But to me, the rest of it, they can pretty well do with even as small as that pallet is only a few inches deep, and you put soil in there, and boy, they really go gangbusters.
It really can. In fact, side note is I've never mentioned this on the show, but I own an e-commerce company, and we used to have a ton of extra pallets. So in addition to using them as kind of like raised beds, I actually tilt them against each other and make sort of a triangle. And I have a lot of my squash trailing on those. And it's kind of fun. I do like a tatum squash where it's kind of like a circular zucchini. I do a curry squash that's kind of like a different shaped butternut. And they just trail kind of through the pallet. And it's really fun because they kind of need that. Some of the squash do need a little bit of trellising, right?
Yes. And what's amazing is you can do a lot of upright gardening. For example, you were talking about the vine crops and going up a trellis or a pallet or a fence. I have seen the funniest veggies growing in the funniest places, like a big, huge banana squash hanging off a fence. You go, how is it hanging on? or watermelon. In Japan, they'll put the watermelon in boxes, and then they have these square watermelon, and it makes it easier to cut. And those kind of things you just don't really think about. And you talk about the creativity in the garden. One last thing, you can make a teepee and put pole beans up that teepee and then leave an opening, and the kids can go inside and just have a little space there inside the garden.
Oh, that's such a good idea. Okay, we're up against a break. We will be right back here on Gardening Utah. After the break, more with LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jana Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time. She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me in our virtual studios is LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens, where, of course, it's always
a great day.
So one of the big questions we keep getting is, right now we're, toward the middle to end of June, and people are saying, is it too late to put in the garden? What can I still plant? Give us your advice.
Well, if it's edibles, you can surely still plant berry bushes, grapevines, fruit trees, and you can plant those all summer long through the whole rest of the season into the fall. If you can find the varieties you're looking for, and we've resupplied multiple times, and we have a great selection back again. Sometimes there's been some shortages the last several weeks, and especially raspberries. There seems to be a draw on that, and strawberries. But I looked far and wide for them, and Tom and I, we've found some great varieties. But in the edibles, you can still plant like tomato starts. You can plant beets and potatoes and other vine crops. The carrots are great, especially the colored carrots. They're really healthy for us too. Above ground, you can plant peppers and lots of herbs. There's still time to put zucchini in and get a great crop of that. The vine crops, like cucumbers, absolutely. You can still get those in. You better hustle in the next week or so to get your watermelon and cantaloupe in, because they take longer. They're going to take 50, 60 days from transplant. But you can grow them yourself, and boy, do they taste good.
Oh, boy. There's just nothing better. There's nothing better. And you guys still have a big selection there at Millcreek Gardens of all of these things, correct?
We have a great selection. And we even have large starts of many of these items, larger starts, so that you can still get them in the garden. And things like cilantro, something like that, that you'd want to maybe plant some starts. You can also plant the seeds and just plant every couple of weeks, plant a few more plants so that you have fresh cilantro. Because cilantro is not one of those like lettuce you can cut and it comes again. Cilantro doesn't come back very much. You cut it and it doesn't give you a very healthy second crop and very little third crop. So keep planting those by seed. And then there's also fun things you can do, like edible flowers. The daylilies are starting to bloom. The young daylily flowers, you can go ahead and eat those. You can saute them, or you can put them in a salad.
I didn't realize that.
There's also nasturtiums. The leaves and the flowers of nasturtiums are edible. Tuberous begonias have a delicious flower. It tastes a little citrusy. Again, you can put that in a salad or float it in a drink.
Ooh.
Put it in your punch bowl. It is gorgeous, and they're very, very good. You'd be surprised.
Really? The begonias?
Yep, the tuberous begonias, the ones that come from the tuber bulb. That tuber bulb looks like a big cookie.
Yeah.
And you plant it in the soil in shade, and they sprout out, and they produce these big, beautiful flowers that really show up in the shady areas of your yard. And you have to take them back out in the fall, or they're going to freeze. And you store them in a composted material like peat moss or forest mulch, or some compost that doesn't let them get too dry, because we live in a really dry climate. You store them in a box, usually something that breathes, not a plastic bag unless you put holes in it. And then you bring it out in the spring again. But anyway, back to edibles. Really, really fun to plant a garden, and boy, especially herbs. You can plant tons of herbs and have delicious food because of it. Also fragrance, things like the lavenders. You can be picking lavenders. They're starting to bloom around town right now. Those blue flowers are amazing. And we even have white lavender this year. And the English lavenders are the hardy ones. We also have other varieties like the French lavenders and the Spanish lavenders. They have a bigger flower to them. They're a little bit more florific, but those most of the time are not reliably hardy. And so you have to plant those just about every year.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I love lavender. Is there anything better than cutting a fresh lavender and just smelling? I mean,
well, maybe cutting fresh rosemary.
Isn't that the truth? And then I was just thinking, well, wait, Jana, there's the rose, some of the roses, and then, oh my word, it's just, there's just nothing better than the aromatics of the earth blessing you with the smell. Speaking of aromatics blessing the earth, we have gardenias there right now, and there's a lot of them in bud and bloom, and other tropical plants like the hibiscus, like the Hawaiian hibiscus flower. We all know that you put behind your ear, and there's also bougainvilleas and mandevilla vines and many other tropical beautiful flowers. And you can plant a little paradise in your area and in your little private spots and favorite places to be in your yard. And I love to add fragrance. Things like the hybrid oriental lilies are very fragrant, as well as the Daphne. It's a little flowering shrub that's an evergreen. They only get maybe up to 3.5 feet tall, and they have these little white to pinkish flowers on them, and they smell so sweet. Oh, my grandmother had those, and every time I smell a Daphne, it takes me right to her backyard. They're incredible.
It's really amazing. And another one that's super fragrant that's really fun is the let's see, what's that called? Starts with an H. Where's my mind here? I'll think about it in a minute. Anyway, very, very sweet flowers, and they bloom in the summertime, and they bloom for a long time, and they're great to put on a fence, and they can take sun or shade. And
is it the honeysuckle?
Honeysuckle. I knew it started with an H. I couldn't think of it. Yeah, the honeysuckles, they are so, so wonderful. And there's many different varieties. There's the Halls, which is pink and white, and then there's a pink lemonade, which is pink, and then there's an orange one and a red one. And you can just have a potpourri of colors with that. It's all great.
Oh, they're so amazing. My brother's got one in his backyard, and I'd always look forward to going over there and smelling one. I need to get one. And wisteria. Talk to me about wisteria.
Oh, man. Wisteria is really a beautiful plant. There's Chinese and Japanese wisteria, and they both have these beautiful, long, grape-like bunching flowers that hang down, and they bloom for a good 6 weeks in the springtime, late spring usually, and they can go on a pergola and hang down, and they're very fragrant, and they're pretty robust and quite easy to grow. You'll want to get one that's aged, though, because they don't bloom when they're young, and we always want it bloomed now, so don't get one that's too tiny, because you'll have to wait a long time for the blossoms.
Yeah, that's true. My sister's got one in her front yard that's been going on for a while, and people just stop and they just ask, like, what is that? So it's always the wisteria. Okay, so when we come back, Yeah, I mean, they're just incredible. So when we come back right after the break, we'll have more with LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. 860 KKAT with more of the fastest growing show on radio. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me is none other than LaRene Bautner from Millcreek Gardens, where it's always
a great day. Da, 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 da.
I love that. I love it so much. And, we're going to talk in this segment about ornamentals and combinations of perennials and stuff. But I want you to quickly tell me a little bit about your mission, because I love it so much, connecting people to plants. And it's so fun to me that people can just go into your nursery and just, like the watermelon story you told me, it's just, I think it's so special when you can go into a garden center and talk to someone who is so knowledgeable and that, has just served the community for so long,
Yeah, well, it's really cool to connect people and plants and do it in the funnest way possible. And the funnest way is I do my best to mirror what the needs are of our guests and to do our best to be consistent, to be there for all of you and to be reliable, to be able to share what we know, share what we love. Plants are toys to me, and I just have a lot of toys that I play with. And some of them I have to cut them to help them behave. Some of them I cut them to help them thicken up and grow better. Some of them we plant deeper so that they can be more robust and big. Like you plant a tomato plant, you plant it in the ground deeper. And it's teaching you some of these tricks and of the trade and being more successful with things is really, really fun for us. And I think that's part of the gem of Millcreek Gardens. It's a special place. It's very spiritual. And, our mission statement talks about it being a place of creating legendary stories of legendary service, of really going out and making sure we're meeting the needs of everyone. And it's been really humbling and remarkable, all in one sentence.
Oh, wow. I just love that. So tell us, what are your favorite plant combos for perennials?
Oh, favorite plant combos for perennials. Well, I love to do from early spring through the late spring, summer into fall. So you've got to get those creeping phlox, the Erebus abretia, and basket of gold. That's the earliest color, along with the crocus bulbs. And then the hyacinths are going to start coming out, and they're very fragrant. You don't plant those crocus, hyacinths, tulips, and daffodils till September, October. You plant them in the fall. But the other gardening plant combinations that are excellent after those early season bloomers, then you're going to have things like the coreopsis and the columbines, the delphiniums, their next wave. The next one, the summer wave, is the different daisies, the gloriosa daisies, the black-eyed Susans, the penstemons. They're just starting to bloom now. And man, the nepeta, which is the catmint, and the salvias and veronicas, which are those spiky, flowery plants that are just very, very generous with their color. That's the next round. And then in the fall, you get the tall sedums and the chrysanthemums and the anemones for shade. So those are some fabulous combinations. But, there's a few that are just gems, like pincushion flower, the scabiosa pincushion. It blooms all summer long, and it just keeps on giving, and you can use it for a little cut flower. It's easy to grow, and
those are purple, right?
There's purple ones and pink ones, butterfly blue and pink.
Ooh, okay.
They're easy. There's other varieties too, but those are the best. And things like the penstemons. Oh, there's the native ones like Palmer's penstemon and penstemon etona, which is firecracker, which is these orangish red flowers that just give and give and give. And these are things that grow in the foothills here, up in the mountains, up in the meadows. And it's super fun. We shouldn't forget about Shasta daisies and the coneflower echinacea family. They also are very, very generous. And you can be planting those all summer long and cutting them, and they'll come again. And the echinacea is also a medicinal plant, and it's very, very beautiful, and it's super water wise. so you don't have to water it tons, especially once it's established. And
Yeah.
there's many, many colors of that echinacea. It's not just the purplish coneflower anymore. There's one called tomato soup. There's some that are orange and yellow, and then there's white ones and light pink and dark pink and double decker, and some that look like an ice cream cone. And
Oh, wow.
it's really fun. But I do love the orange ones and the bright yellow ones. They are so, so beautiful.
They really are.
They're
really,
very
really
floriferous. That and Shasta daisies, the white Shasta daisies. There's also these new ones out. It's called the Dream Series, and there's yellow ones with white centers and darker yellow, and white ones with really pretty different types of flowers. Like there's one with a spoon flower that has the petals come out and they're shaped like a spoon on the end, and then there's some that are really frilly and lacy, and the genetics are really good, so they have strong stems and don't fall over. And that's also a wonderful thing. The plant world out there has worked really hard, very diligent in giving us great plants with lots of flower power. And so many of these perennials are blooming way longer now because they've really cleaned up the diseases and the challenges with them. And they've bred some varieties that are just dynamo.
You know, that's such a good point, because I think some people, when they think echinacea or Shasta daisy or even salvia, they think, oh, well, my salvia blooms, but then it flops over. But they're not realizing that these companies are improving these plants every year to be more desirable.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does make sense to just start over with something brand new from the garden center.
Yeah, well, you might have heard of May Night Salvia. It's like the most popular one. Well, now there's April Night, which is an earlier bloomer, and then there is a miniature April Night that blooms even earlier because it's shorter and more stocky. So those are super fun. And between the Veronicas and the Salvias, man, there's just an abundance of color all summer long.
Oh, I love it. Now talk to me about ornamental shrubs. What are some of your favorites?
Well, you can't beat the wonderful Daphne that's fragrant. We've already talked about that just a little bit. And it's an evergreen, so it keeps its foliage this summer. Summer ice happens to have a little white streak on the outside edge of the leaves, and it does bloom all summer long, this little white flower. It's got blooms on at least 90% of the summer, if not 100%. And again, it smells very sweet fragrance like a gardenia. There's also things like golden privet and red tip photinia, which is an evergreen. And then there's the variegated euonymus, which is really colorful. There's the taller growing ones like Silver King and the golden euonymus, as well as the creeping ones like Emerald Gate and Emerald Gold euonymus, which are green and white and green and gold, and they spread along the ground. And these are plants that have leaves on them every day of the year because they're evergreen, and they're really, really beautiful. Dwarf spirea, 9 barks, those are wonderful. They give color all season long, either with flowers or with their foliage. And, you know, these things are plants that grow really well with dwarf conifers. We haven't talked much about that. Those are evergreens that are smaller, and they are beautiful every day of the year, as well as putting those things with things like Japanese maple, which has some gorgeous texture as well as awesome fall color. And people say, oh, Japanese maples, they must be hard to grow. They're not. They're tough. There's many of them growing here in the valley as well as across the bench up on the avenues. And they're pretty hardy.
It's my absolute favorite tree.
Yeah, mine too. And especially if you do red dragon, lace leaf maple, and tamukiyama, you can put those in a lot of sun, and they'll be pretty successful, especially red dragon. Now, we have some golden Japanese maples, and they're out there. I was looking at them today, and they're in quite a bit of sun, and they're burning on the top. And we need to put those in more shade. But there are others like Fire Glow and just the regular red leaf Bloodgood maple. You can put those in quite a bit of sun, and they're going to get like 8 to 12, maybe up to 15 feet tall. You can keep them smaller if you want. But the lace leaves only get, usually 4 to 6 feet tall, and the rest get maybe 7 to 15 feet tall, depending on the variety and how you treat them. But you can have those beautiful plants, and even in quite a bit of sun. And hey, Jana, the real deal here is with those kind of plants, and really with all of them, add compost to the soil when you plant them. You add compost to the soil, and a plant starter when you plant them to get the roots going and get the plant established quick. Especially in our dry climate, and give them plenty of water the first season. These plants are going to be very generous and give you lots of joy and color and the fragrance that they're gonna achieve, you'll be in heaven in your own little yard.
Absolutely. It's like a little bit of paradise. And as you're talking, I'm picturing a Japanese lace leaf maple paired with like a weeping Norway spruce or something like that. What are some of your favorite pairings with lace leaf maples?
Yeah, I love putting a little blue underneath them, either something like the dianthus that has the grayish blue foliage, or a blue star juniper, or a creeping icy blue juniper, which only grows 4 inches tall and spreads out. This blue star juniper gets about 2 feet by 2 feet, so it's more of a clumping one. But then I love to add the gold, like I mentioned earlier, the golden euonymus, the creeping one that's emerald and gold, or even the Angelina sedum, which is gold, or some of the veronicas that are creeping veronica that are golden, like one's called Sunshine. And the foliage is just golden, and so it makes it pop. It's very fun. The Angelina sedum actually goes orange in the winter. So it's like an little evergreen perennial. And there's many, many sedums. Oh my goodness, we could just have a whole clip on sedums because I love them so much. And I know them well. Sun Sparkler series of sedum is incredible. Look it up, Sun Sparkler. It's about 7 colors. There's one called Firecracker, another one called Jade Tuffet, Lime Twister, which is variegated. Blue Elf, they're just gorgeous. They're less than knee high. They're probably 6 to 10 inches tall, depending on the variety. And the foliage is just incredible. Super water wise. As the seasons change, so do the colors in the leaves. And it's just super fun to take a family of plants and have fun with that. Now, as far as what else to pair that with, these water-wise plants do really well together, like the ice plant, which is Delosperma. And you put those with the sempervirens, hens and chicks, and those in the winter are super cool too. So there are many, many combinations. And we also have some gardens out there that we've planted. You can come in and sample that with your eye, enjoy that, and take on the smells and fragrances, the different looks of the plants and the perennials. And, it's not too late to plant. So get out there in the garden and have a lot of fun and enjoy it.
Oh, and check it out at Millcreek Gardens. And why don't you give everybody your address, your hours, and how they can find you online and all the details.
Okay, well, we're at www.millcreekgardens.com, and we're physically located at 3500 South on 9th East. That's your favorite garden center since 1955. And we are open 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday.
Fantastic.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Gardening Utah. As always, let us know what you would like to see on our show. Message us on Instagram. Our handle is @GardeningUtah. And we also have a Facebook page now, and it's the same name, Gardening Utah. It was inevitable. It had to happen. So if you would like to be considered a guest or a sponsor of our show, reach out to us on either of those platforms. Thank you to LaRene Bautner of Millcreek Gardens for joining me today and sharing with us her love of plants and giving us so many great gardening tips. And thank you for listening. Join us again next week when we talk again with Eric Marble from Chanshire Sod Farms. Last week's episode was jam-packed with so many great lawn care tips, but we still felt like we had more to tackle. So in this next week's episode, we talk about mowing and we talk about weed prevention. And then we have a special segment just focusing on answering the frequently asked questions about lawn care in Utah. Thank you to progressiveplants.com for sponsoring this episode. When you support our sponsors, you support our show. Make sure that you subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening now so that you never miss an episode. And you know what? We give shout outs on the show for 5-star ratings. So give us some love and we'll read it back to you on the show. And hey, a quick happy birthday shout out to our producer, Lambo. I'm Jana Francis. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on Gardening Utah. And remember, grow big or go home.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.